If translation was the capstone for grammar, then original composition formed the principal activity for the more advanced training in rhetoric. The first steps in this direction were oral, even dramatic. Pupils and master held question-and-answer conversations in Latin. But soon reading and writing are closely intertwined. At the most basic level, they strung together sententiae into themes, thus moving out from the proverbial lore of their reading into slightly more expanded sententiousness. With the more advanced readings, like the Ad Herennium or Ovid's Heroides, they began to compose epistles in prose or verse. Finally, they were expected to produce full-blow orations. All these educational processes consist of creative composition emerging from a set of readings that are at once theoretical and exemplary, offering both precept and prototype. Here, the work depended on post-classical workbooks emerging out of Cicero and Quintilian, including the Epitome of Sucinbrodus and the Progymnastigmata of Opthronius. More than their loftier predecessors, these texts were used interactively. They directed pupils essentially to place themselves in hypothetical or imaginative situations, sometimes historical, sometimes mythological, and to create their own Latin text. The resulting exercises were inevitably full of tropes, self-conscious about their status as discourse, and most important of all, they amounted to dramatic impersonations. So, to descend to a perhaps simplistic historical comparison, while we have for decades taught college students to express their own selves and are rewarded with a fundamentally solipsistic public discourse, Renaissance education taught its upper grammar school students to impersonate other voices, and they were rewarded with a flowering of public oratory and theater. Finally, there is one other major author, the only modern, whose influence shaped the process of an English 16th century education. In a series of texts on education, including the Institution Hominis Christiani, the De Ration Studi, and the Institutio Principis Christiani, and in a set of close personal relations with John Colet, Dean of St. Paul's, Erasmus had laid out nearly all the principles of modern education. It is Erasmus who gives official status to the logical line that goes back towards Cicero and Aristotle and forward towards Descartes. That is, a set of stable and coordinated relations between truth and language. It is Erasmus who establishes the canon of classical authors suitable for instruction, and it is he who enforces the heuristic and moral value of the sententia in reading matter. It was his edition of Cato that was widely used in school, while also relegating purely sententious, often spuriously classical works to a secondary position in favor of a moralistic literary criticism applied to major writers. It is Erasmus who shows the way to students, both in his De Conscribendis Epistolis and in his colloquies. In the first demonstrating how to place letter writing in a dramatic context, and in the second offering the fullest modern example of humanistic discussion in multiple voices written in fine classical Latin. Then at the high point of grammar school education came his famous Decopia, which offered both precept and example in the composition of language that was elegant, highly figured, and capable of almost infinite variation. Whether Shakespeare read Erasmus or not, he certainly had an Erasmian education. The marks of all these processes and influences are written everywhere in Shakespeare's text. A simple census of all the Latin that appears in the play texts reveals how many of the phrases are traditional maxims traceable to early education. Often they are taken specifically from Lilly's Latin grammar, as for instance Sir Andrew's quote, "Not to be abed after midnight is to be up betimes," and "Deliculo surgere," to rise at dawn, "thou knowest," end of quote. 12th night, 2, 3, 1-2. Or Tranio's quote, "If love have touched you, naught remains but so. Redeem te captum quam quies minimo," which means ransom yourself from captivity at the lowest possible price. End of quote. Taming of the Shrew, which is actually misquoted just as it is in Lilly's Latin grammar. Indeed, when Horace's oft-repeated, quote, "integer vitae," meaning the man upright in life, end of quote, is cited in Titus Andronicus, Chiron actually says, "I read it in the grammar long ago." Whether vernacular or classical, Shakespeare's usage is deeply imbued with sententiae, and some of the most famous of his riffs on traditional expressions like, quote, "all the world's a stage," end of quote, or, quote, "we are such stuff as dreams are made on," end of quote, derive from Latin tags learned in school. Even Shakespeare's Bible shows evidence of his classical training. The books he most commonly cites are just the same Psalms, Proverbs, and Ecclesiasticus that he translated into Latin as a schoolboy. On a number of occasions, Shakespeare actually stages primary education. In The Taming of the Shrew, Lucentio, impersonating a Latin tutor to gain access to Bianca, follows the schoolroom practice of construing or translating. His text is from the first book of Ovid's Heroids. But given his amorous purposes, the translation he offers is, to say the least, idiosyncratic. Quote, Hic ebat, as I told you before, Simois, I am Lucentio, hic est, son unto Vincentio of Pisa, Sigea Tellus, disguised thus to get your love, end of quote. Bianca, herself no mean pupil, returns the translation exercise, as students were expected to do. Quote, Hic ibit simois, I know you not. Hic est Sigea Tellus, I trust you not, end of quote. Her translation at least has the virtue of keeping the Latin clauses logically together. For the record, the lines actually mean, quote, here flowed the Simois, here lies the Sigean land, end of quote. The Merry Wives of Windsor includes a whole scene explicitly taken from instruction in Lilly's grammar, referred to as the, quote, accidents, end of quote. Here the construing is misconstrued not only by deliberate deception, but by the ignorance of the female onlookers who turn innocent Latin into off-color English, and by the mediocre performance of the pupil, William, in response to his Welsh schoolmaster, Evans. He does reasonably well with the basics, such as hic, hook, hock, but he comes aground in the more advanced translation practice. Evans. What is lapis, William? William. A stone. Evans. And what is a stone, William? William. A pebble. Evans. No, it is lapis. I pray you remember in your praying. William. Lapis. William fails at the Cicer-Ascham translation method, i.e. Latin to English and back to Latin. Love's Labour's Lost is above all Shakespeare's monument to the problems of grammar and rhetoric. There is hardly a scene that does not contain exercises in semantics or translation or else larger theories of language. Critical to the whole enterprise is the trio of pseudo-learned characters, Don Armado, the new style wit, Nathaniel, the half-educated priest, and of special interest here, Holofernes, the classically trained schoolmaster. More pedant than pedagogue, Holofernes speaks in a perpetual construing from Latin to English. He cites numerous schoolbook sententiae. He quotes and comments on Mantuan as well as Ovid. He lords it over his fellow, quote, scholars, end of quote. He offers time-honored and conservative views on English orthography. Just how deeply these forms of reading and learning penetrated Shakespeare's invitation may be observed most fully in a scene where no actual schoolmaster appears. It is an exchange between Touchstone and William in As You Like It. Touchstone, is thy name William? William,
Hi.
sir.
I was just returning your call. Give me a call back when you get a chance. I'll be out for a while, so just go ahead and call me. Okay, bye.
Touchstone, a fair name. Wast born i' the forest here? William, aye, sir, I thank God. Touchstone, thank God, a good answer. You do love this maid? William, I do, sir. Touchstone, give me your hand. Art thou learned? William, no, sir. Touchstone, then learn this of me. To have is to have. For it is a figure in rhetoric that drink, being poured out of a cup into a glass, by filling the one doth empty the other. For all you writers do consent that Ips is he. Now you are not Ips, for I am he. William, which he, sir? Touchstone, he, sir, that must marry this woman. Therefore, you, clown, abandon, which is in the vulgar, leave, the society which in the boorish is company of this female, which in the common is woman, which together is abandon the society of this female, or clown, thou perishest, or to thy better understanding diest, or to wit, I kill thee, make thee away, translate thy life into death, thy liberty into bondage. I will deal in poison with thee, or in bastinado, or in steel. I will bandy with thee in faction. I will o'errun thee with policy. I will kill thee 150 ways.